Here it is, Monday, February 1st, 2021, and I'm presenting my Mars project idea. So, first of all, I grew up on a farm, and it was fun. I loved it. This little building here in the foreground was my workshop of sorts. Um, I'm the little kid in the back. My older brother, I only have one brother, is in the front, and he grew up to become a farmer. I did not. I just did not want to be a farmer and wanted to be an astronaut or something. So here I am as a young teenager in front of the building where the astronauts were training to land on the moon back then. At the end of high school, I applied to three places, and out of the three of them, I only got accepted off the waiting list into Cornell. So graduated there with a Bachelor of Arts degree in physics. And then after that, I studied planetary sciences at the University of Arizona for a year. Got to look through this telescope, pretty much destroy some equipment just about. That was typical of my life. Then I went and worked off in aerospace, and this is what brought me to California. So here I am as part of a team carrying out an experiment in a wind tunnel uh, related to, well, missile defense. But eventually I won the Cold War, and even while I was there, I studied adult education type courses at UCI. I actually met this robot later on as a guest of NASA, and it's now up on the space station. So there's no pictures to go with the second part. It just says I was kind of bumbling along through my life, working in a cubicle as an aerospace engineer, when someone important to me kind of turned to me one day and said, "Do something." And I interpreted that as, she said, "Phil, do something." And I interpreted that as, what should I be doing with my life that actually improves life for all the things that bother me when I turn on a TV and I look at the news and I have my own impressions about how life is going. And so, as a result of deep contemplation, for about a month and a half, and trying this and trying that and applying here and there, I finally sat down and wrote a letter to the Vice President of the United States. And it was 10 pages long, and I just poured my heart out into it, and all about how I think we could use the space program as a way of improving life here in the United States and making a difference. So that really came about as a result of someone challenging me 30 years ago to do something. So now here's what I came up with. Although this doesn't really convey it, all these words, the idea is I saw the experience of the Apollo program and what it could have done for US society. And when I look at the plans that people have regarding going to Mars, it's really not using the capabilities of such a mission for uh, making some changes, improvements, hopefully, improvements here in the United States. So, what is my brilliant plan? First of all, there's the Apollo astronauts here in the upper left picture, and they had a huge ticker tape parade that spanned the world, and then they retired and they were left on their own after that. Whereas if I do this Mars project correctly, the idea is the big part of the mission really takes place after the people who've gone to Mars come to Earth and know they're not just retired and farmed out to write books, but this is more like the active part of the whole mission, getting down here and becoming like mentors or public servants, educators, useful people in society. I haven't traveled much in the world, but I did go down to South America several times. And so I couldn't help but notice the difference between governments and society and culture values between North and South America. In South America, they had these guys who would just go in and extract the wealth and extract the slaves, and then they would go back to Europe. Whereas in North America, we had more of a homesteading mindset that said, "Oh, we're bringing our families, we're bringing our family dog, and we're settling here." And so that led to quite a different value system between the people who live in these countries. Even now, 500 years later, this founding culture is what takes root. So here in the United States, this is from oh FDR's speech, getting the United States into World War II. You know, what are the things that we care about, and what would we fight for? Freedom of speech has been a big one. Well, you can read the titles. So here's a reminder that these are the values that in the United States we aspire to embrace, and it's a struggle to get from these things to get up to these things. I saw this mural someplace up in well along the Columbia River, and here's my picture of it. And it shows from the settlers' point of view just how bountiful life was good, and we've got progress, and life is good. But when you look at the entire mural, it's trying to show progression from old time to future time or present time as you go left to right. And what's missing off on the left is, well, where's you know the Native American family unit, and where's the guy? So he wasn't really highly respected, I would say, by the settlers and colonizers. As we expanded west, we weren't really being very fair and equitable with the nomadic type people that we displaced and murdered a lot of them. And so it's not really a bright spot in our founding history. And along with that, uh, the whole slavery chapter of the foundation of the United States is not something that we're proud of. All those things are in our history, but we we have lingering effects up through today. And so there was a TV show on Nova about education, and of course, as a teacher, I watched it, and here's some of the highlights that I jotted in my notes from it. Like, okay, and you might be hearing some of this stuff being spouted today in our government about, gosh, we're not in a great shape. This is what the issues are here in the United States. So we actually have a poverty rate that's pretty high up, and it shouldn't be as high as it actually is. And when you're just struggling with survival, it makes it harder for you to be ready to learn and to want to flourish. I've taught in a school that had the highest dropout rate in the country, where 1/4 of my ninth grade students actually graduated, and that's quite an experience. No, it's not in this district. It was in where I taught before this district. And with all those things going on, if you can't take the time to envision a brighter future for yourself, how are you going to work towards it? So, some guidance and advice I got from a psychologist who, like me, is all enthusiastic about sending people to Mars. She pointed out that whatever the founding culture is, as you establish a new colony someplace, that's going to dominate for, we're going on 500 years now. So the Bandeirantes dominated down in Brazil, and the Daniel Boone mindset dominated up here in the United States. And if we send a football team to colonize Mars, that will be the mindset, the dominant culture on Mars. And so we have the freedom to design what kind of culture would we consider to be desirable. Do we want, for example, the Chinese government to set up their culture and their values and belief systems, instead of us? Whoever gets there first and establishes it, that's what it's going to be. And is a football team mentality what we most cherish? What do we aspire to? So this one might be disputed by people, but okay, in terms of lip service at least, we claim we would like to become a society that is free from major prejudices based on all these different categories, whatever you want to name. There are other people who would dispute, do they really want to be like that? Well, at least this is what we say that we would like. And so projecting that, that's what we would like the Martians to be like once we establish a Martian culture up there. And then, well, what does it take to actually create a foundation culture that's going to last? I was a crew member on a simulated Mars base for 2 weeks back in 2002, and there were six of us. Only five made it to the end of the simulation. Yeah, we lost a crew member on our rotation, but our first night there was the handover from the previous crew, and our last night there was the handover to the next crew. And our previous crew was very strong on French members, and their values and stuff were different from what ours were mostly. We had a Finnish planetary science in our group, and you could look it up someday. But the point is, it didn't sustain from crew to crew. So just based on what I've seen as a teacher working in a 7 to 12 high school about what the culture is for the incoming class and how does it affect the whole high school attitude. So here's the numbers that kind of just to me seem like, all right, let's use this as a straw man concept. Maybe these values, at least 50 people, and only 1/5 of them are rolling over at any one time. And okay, what kind of ships can we use for sending people to Mars? So if we had two ships, each going to Mars every opportunity, and the opportunity is only once every 26 months, and each ship has 12 people, 6 people on it. So there's a dozen people in space, and out of them, not all of them land, not all of them stay. So, like the first cycle, if you're trying to build up a colony on Mars, maybe 9 out of the 12 people would remain on Mars and 3 come back to Earth as astronauts. And then on the next cycle, and then the next and the next. And so here's a graph saying the same thing as this data table. So the green line is what the total population would be on Mars. The red line at the bottom is how many people are returning to Earth in a given cycle. And it's stable at about 53 people or so on the surface of Mars. And the idea is if my anecdotal evidence happens to be valid, then this is a stable new Martian society at this point. And given that each cycle is 26 months and it's around cycle 8 or 9 that it becomes stable, that's really just a time period of 18 years to have established a culture that will dominate for the next 500 years. So it's worthwhile to consider designing what kind of society we would like to, aspire to create on Mars. Of course, the whole project involves not just uh, sending people to Mars. I mean, I'm just using that as a tool, and there's lots of little changes I want to make here along the way using that tool. So one of them is trying to entice more people to get higher levels of education. And so this little piece of that puzzle says, all right, if you're getting a degree of some kind in college, you can apply for a scholarship. And if you get it, then you can, we'll pay for you to go get additional master's degrees in whatever additional subjects you want to study. And if you don't pass the exam, well, maybe we'll at least give you 2 years employment, which is nice, working on the preparation for people who do go off to Mars. So that's just one little piece There are lots of little pieces, and it's basically the big picture would be to put this into three phases. So the first part is dealing with you students and sending you out to explore ever larger parts of planet Earth and getting you, attuned to other people's cultures and be respectful and all the things we would like you to be. And eventually you go off to Mars and you're not just an astronaut visiting Mars, but you're more of a settler. Maybe I should use the word colonist, maybe the word settler, uh, living on Mars and caring for life that's brought from Earth to Mars, which is a whole additional issue. But the value in all this is only really becoming apparent in the third phase here, where after you've learned and developed a hopefully better society on Mars, now come to Earth uh, and do some public service. Maybe teach, maybe mentor, maybe this, maybe that. But there's plenty of room for uh, improvement here. So this is just a representative picture of the first phase. You students go off and explore Earth, take notes, keep journals, uh, go off to Mars. You get to explore Mars along with establishing the settlement. So here, working with rovers, maybe you're searching for evidence of past life on Mars. Another little piece of the puzzle is to have much more public involvement than NASA's used to. Like, here's this eighth grade biology class directing people on Mars on their idea of searching for life on Mars. And do some cultural activities up there as well, not just science investigations, but like send a rover to visit a historical landing site, not necessarily just for the scientific reason, but for the cultural reason as well. So here's phase three. And the idea is when people come back from Mars, we might be concerned about quarantining them. This even happened when we brought back the first astronauts from the moon. We put them in isolation for 3 weeks, worried about moon germs or bugs getting out and becoming a pandemic. So certainly we would have that kind of fear for anyone returning from Mars after being there for a while. So how do you deal with that? And this was my brilliant plan: get Congress involved. And we want to introduce the Martians, as I'm going to refer to them, back to the United States, where they had explored it when they were still students. But how do we transport them around? And so my brilliant plan was put them on a specially modified railroad car and send them along the Amtrak routes. So the red lines that you've seen here are train routes in the United States. And the little picture here shows the family choosing on their vacation to check out one or more of these train routes and judge for themselves which route they prefer as a suggestion to support for the Martians when they come to Earth. What should we show them? And the kids are involved as well, as you can see. Great. And this was a role for Congress. And the idea was, okay, so Congress will debate and negotiate amongst themselves and say, oh, we should go this route. No, we should go that route. So I'm going to come back to the slide later. This is really the part where you students are going to get involved this semester. So what I have done over all these years, there I am as a youngster. Yes, I got involved. That's my congressman off on the right side of the image, and another supporting friend beside me, and jointly we did a bunch of stuff, particularly the first few years that I got into this. And so I've done presentations. One of the more recent ones was with Mr. Jernigan off in Washington, D.C. And if you go on YouTube, you can actually find it. They misspelled my name, but it was at a Mars Society presentation. Uh, hmm. I've sent students out on field trips and had them involved, not during the current pandemic. I did set up this aerospace engineering course uh, and co-founded Astronomy Night with Mr. Jernigan and Mr. Boschman. What you students can do at this point, uh, if you develop an idea, if someone comes along and tells you, get involved, do something. Well, here's my advice: work towards something good instead of something bad. Build a support network, and write down exactly what you're trying to do, or make images that you can hang on your wall. If you're going to try to do something on a national scale, everyone is going back to the Constitution right now, but it was limited by the technology of the day. And now we can have something that's more democratic and less republic, where republic means we hire our representatives and they're supposed to be level headed, as opposed to democratic, where one person, one vote on issues closer to home, I guess I should say. So, advice that I've collected from wherever: gracious professionalism. And that's a phrase from our robotics competition. So I think Matthew and other students here would recognize that phrase down at the bottom. Gracious professionalism. So you're not knocking down and criticizing other people, you're actually helping and supporting even your competitors. And that's a big uh, characteristic in that particular robotics competition. And if we applied much more of it, particularly in politics, we wouldn't be where we are today. Oh man, there's a 3 minute break, and I think I'm just going to roll through the break today and then give you 3 minutes off when I finish my slides. So uh, don't be mean, don't troll, don't be aloof. Uh, when it comes to designing a society on Mars, uh, they have a severe labor shortage there. Like there's zero people on Mars. And so, things to consider. Are there going to be private ownership of weapons on Mars? Well, you know, when the United States sets up foreign governments like Japan and Germany, we did not make them like our own government. So consider that. Now, WASC is something I would like you to ask your teachers about. It is how schools here in California, or on the West Coast in particular, uh, get validated in what they're doing. So it's a process where the school studies itself, and that's kind of the upper right bubble there. Eventually, a team put together from other schools come out and visit and check our self-study results. And that visit in our school is coming up this school year, pretty soon, in fact. And then they make their recommendations, and then we go through this whole cycle all over again and say, you're right. What can we do to change and make the quality of our school even better, even better? And so this cycle repeats every 2 to 6 years. And what I am proposing is that we use the Martians to help set up a system like that for government. So here is a slide showing a scorecard for just one nation on Earth. And on the scorecard, they're showing, well, here's how they're doing in all these different categories. And it's color coded, so yellow means, this is pretty good. It's average for what nations do. And red is below average. A red circle means even farther below average. Blue is above average. Blue with a circle is even better above average. So, for example, the blue circle for equality of political power by gender That's something that this particular country is good at. And by the way, this is the highest ranked country in the world, and it's not the United States. There's the end of our 3 minute break. You'll get it. You'll get it. So WASC and a scorecard like this and visiting Martians, all that put together, there's the value I would see in this. In my opinion, today Congress is kind of gridlocked. Maybe it's going to thaw out. But 30 years ago, when I came up with this idea of the train routes, it was meant to be almost like a playful uh, competition between the major political parties and certainly negotiations about, oh, let's do this route. In fact, here's what I wrote in that letter to the vice president. The route that Congress comes up with will be a convolution of the locations of America's scenic wonders and American politics. Future students of American politics will take courses that delve into ferreting out the behind the scenes interplay of power that led to a particular zig or zag in the final route selected for the educated man. The senator in this state had to support the bill sponsored by the senator in that state to get the train to pass through this congressional district. But that meant that, da, da, da. And of course, 30 years later, we wouldn't talk about an educated man, we talk about the Martian ambassadors coming to Earth. Well, in my opinion, Congress is fallen farther away from being able to do something like this over the past 30 years. So the project for you students, and by the way, you know that modified railroad car can be an old classic thing. It doesn't have to be ultra modern uh, in appearance. This is just a reminder that it can be something shockingly different, maybe not quite this old fashioned, maybe with wood paneling at least. But what will the Martians see is kind of a question, right? We would like them to be impressed with what's happened while they were on Mars, not be disappointed when they come back. And here's the connection with the AP Physics course. So they have a program called We Recognition. And if the students do all this stuff, and if the teacher does all the correct stuff, then they get a little recognition, maybe from AP Central, maybe something they can put on their college applications. But it says, be able to do some research, investigate this, come up with an action plan, take action, okay, and report, celebrate, and then keep a record and reflect on it throughout the project. So what I have in mind as the project is for you students to work out a way to replace Congress and find out from the hypothetical US citizens that I would like to think that are out there who are not polarized uh, to being purely tribal, and finding out from US citizens what route would they select. Of course, it's all non-binding, right? I mean, we haven't even launched anyone to Mars yet, let alone 18 years later. But I don't see Congress as being up to the task anymore. And I've always wanted to have at least some suggestion. The rules I suggested 30 years ago were okay, so Congress picks the starting point. The route has to at least go through Iowa, just because it's like a centrally located state. And the route ends at Union Station in Washington, D.C. And then Martians kind of make their way, first time they get actually walking out on US soil, they just walk up to the Library of Congress and turn in their journals that they've been keeping all this time. For you students, the project would be actually assessing from US citizens what kind of route people would work out. And there's some, cautions I would toss out there. There are people who actually, I'm going to end my slideshow I have one slide left. Whoops, actually, of course, there's all the technical aerospace engineering parts to go with this. Here's an example from this past Saturday's lecture about here's how much radiation shielding you would need for a spacecraft. So there is the aerospace aspect to it. But here's a fine picture of the science department. And the idea is, look, aerospace projects support social needs and public needs. So this concludes my presentation.